Hello, welcome to the GPP Chin Music Podcast. I'm Big Italy 42. He's Scott Mailwig at Sports 25 to Life. And we're here talking about some GPP plays for your action tonight on FanDuel and DraftKings. Obviously, a huge 15-game slate as there has been on Friday. We'll go ahead and start off by telling you a little bit of weather concerns. Looks like significant chance for rain all night in Colorado and Chicago. So the Colorado Dodgers game and the Reds and White Sox both not looking good, but it's also early, so monitor that situation. Maybe check Twitter, see what's going on. Obviously, no official word of anything yet, but neither one looking particularly good right now.
Yeah, definitely not. It looks like it's going to rain in both those places all night, so that's a little unfortunate since a couple of those guys in those games have really nice prices today, too.
Yeah.
But, we got plenty of other games to work with. There's not too many other major rain concerns. I think the only other one I really saw that was even like remotely bad was Detroit, Kansas City and Detroit, but even that's not horrible.
Yeah.
So I think we're pretty good besides that.
Yeah, it seems like it. We'll still highlight plays from those games that we really like just in case. Obviously, nothing's been postponed. It just doesn't seem likely. So we'll go ahead and start off here by talking about starting pitchers. So obviously Matt Harvey's going to be a popular pick, cash games and GPPs, and I'm certainly not going to be fading him in GPPs, but I'm not going to be 100% Harvey across the board on two pitcher sites like DK because I don't feel like that is going to do you a whole lot of good on DraftKings because he's going to be a popular pick.
Yep.
Some other guys I like. Gio Gonzalez is a monster favorite. Doesn't usually pitch in deep into games and obviously always has those walk concerns to some extent. But he's interesting. James Shields is another guy with second highest strikeout rate in the league. Been having big time troubles with home runs, but has not been the norm for Shields. So I think he's certainly still in play tonight with that big upside. Who are some other guys you're looking at here for tournaments? Are there any of those guys you like a lot?
I like some of those guys. There's a lot of really similar pitching options today. Like one guy that I kind of like is Liriano against St. Louis. I know St. Louis has been hitting the ball really well, but he's a decent favorite in this game. I don't love the price, but I think he's going to be pretty low owned. And he kind of takes Carpenter a knock on Carpenter a little bit with being a lefty. Obviously, they still have Holiday and a couple other really good righties in that lineup, but I think he's an interesting GPP play. I looked at Sonny Gray a little bit. I hate his price on DraftKings, though.
Yeah.
At Seattle, though, is decent. Obviously, you have to deal with Nelson Cruz, but the guys that are supposed to crush righties in that lineup haven't been doing that so far. And so I think he's a pretty strong play. He's another guy that he's been really up and down this year. We've seen a couple 25-plus point DraftKings games out of him. And then we've seen a couple where he's looked terrible. So I think he's a pretty strong GPP play today also.
Yeah, I'm with you there, especially with it, like you mentioned, his price being up there. He's going to be really low owned due to that. And, that puts him in play for me. Cole Hamels isn't the guy that I'm really looking at today. He's an underdog at home to Matt Harvey, obviously. And, he's just, outside of that game against the Cardinals, he just has not looked good. So I'm really just not a big fan of his really at all tonight. Not a guy that I'm really looking to target. Jimmy Nelson's an interesting guy. We saw John Lackey all of a sudden look like the strikeout king against the Cubs yesterday. We know Nelson has the stuff to get it done. Did have 6 Ks against them last time out. Gave up 300 runs in 6 2/3. But, he's certainly got big upside, and he's got a really nice price tag at $6,200 on DraftKings. So I think he's certainly in play.
Yeah. One other guy, really cheap guy that I'm looking at is Adam Warren's a favorite today for the Yankees. 4,800 on DraftKings, I believe. Is that right? I lost that now. Yeah, 4,800 on DraftKings today. He's pitched 5 2/3 3 games in a row. Obviously not stellar, but I'll take 5 2/3 out of a guy for 4,800 with the Yankees' offense. It's looked really good hitting behind him. Obviously, Baltimore's got a decent offense, but they don't really scare me at all. So I think he's the guy that I'm going to be looking at really, really cheap to get a lot of the hitters I really like in my lineup today as far as GPPs go.
Yeah, and I know Warren was the guy that you were on when he was really cheap a couple starts ago on DraftKings. Paid off really nicely that game against Tampa Bay. So certainly some merits taking him there. $6,900 on FanDuel is going to be too much. No thanks there. You got a couple other interesting options. Tim Lincecum seems like he's kind of adapted. He's not the big strikeout guy that he once was, but now has a career-high ground ball rate so far this year. So maybe he's realizing, this is the new way to go. He's a talented pitcher. We all know he's won the Cy Young multiple times. He's a guy, maybe he's realizing, I'm going to be a contact pitcher. He's going to keep the ball on the ground, and it's worked out really well for him recently. I mean, he had one bad start, but outside of that, he's been really consistent. Miami's offense right around league average against righties, so outside of Giancarlo Stanton, you're really not concerned. And I mean, this is a guy who mowed down the Angels in this ballpark. He mowed down the Dodgers as well. 5 Ks over 6 innings, just gave up 1 run. So, I mean, he makes for an interesting play tonight. Not a huge upside guy, but a guy that might eat up some innings for you.
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned the Marlins have been really struggling against righties, and they really don't have any lefties on their 25-man roster. It's the crazy thing. They have, like, their backup first baseman's a lefty who they hate playing.
Jeff Baker, yeah.
Yeah, is that who it is?
I thought it was Jeff Baker.
He's on the roster. There's another backup first baseman that they have that they've been playing, like, 1 time every 2 weeks against a righty or whatever. That's a left-handed hitter. That's okay. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but like they can't even stack lefties to improve against righties. So like you said, I mean, you got to worry about D. Gordon getting on base and stealing bases and scoring runs, and then you got to worry about Stanton. Outside of that, their lineup is not intimidating whatsoever. So I really like that play. Another cheaper guy that I like quite a bit today is Carnes. I believe he's a favorite. Is that right?
I think he's a slight favorite.
Yeah, slight favorite, -112 against Texas is what I have. Texas hasn't been hitting righties really well. I mean, it's not a play that I get really excited about, but at 5,700 on DraftKings, he's not super expensive on FanDuel either. He's been, I mean, pretty solid DraftKings-wise. He scored at least 15 DraftKings points in 4 of his last 5 games. That's not bad for a just over 5K price tag. He struck out, I believe, almost 5 batters a game in that stretch. I mean, he's just a guy that I think has some decent upside. He's not getting really deep into games, but we've seen him go 7 innings twice already this year. So he's a guy that has some upside, I think, for his price. Nothing spectacular, but just another guy I'm looking at cheap-wise if I'm trying to stack up my hitters, especially if I want to stack one of these higher total teams that are already priced up on DraftKings.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that call. So, if you get a cheap pitcher who, maybe you're not necessarily going to get the strikeout upside, but a guy that's going to eat up some innings for you, pitch deep into a game, and just not kill your team, then that's a good way to go, especially with a lot of hitters in good spots tonight that we want to get some exposure to. So I think that's a solid way to go. Are there any other options you like at pitcher? Because that's gonna be the wrap for me. Nobody else I'm really targeting.
Yeah, that was my last guy I had that was at my list at the bottom. I mean, once we got through those top guys, like you said, really in the middle there, it's really just Lincecum.
Yep.
Outside of that, I'm probably either spending up and taking value hitters or going way down to a guy like Warren or Carnes or something like that, along with one of those aces and trying to load up on my batters.
Yeah. I could see maybe a single entry being like a Jared Cozart. He does a great job keeping the ball on the ground. Obviously a pitcher's park, so he's in play, I guess, but such a low strikeout rate and not a guy that you don't expect much out of him. So
like even if he has a nice day, I mean, he's not giving you like a GPP winning score is the problem.
Yeah, I mean, if he was priced around like mid 5Ks, you could certainly see him being the guy. But that's doesn't seem like the way that I'm going to be going tonight. Yeah, like you said, really, really limited upside. All right, moving on to catcher here, where if we can play him, I would love to play Yasmani Grandal. Obviously going to be a very, very popular play. I'm going to be playing in cash games if that game goes as well because he's just in a really great spot. On base, 15 of his last 20 plate appearances, just asinine how good this guy has been recently. But doesn't look too good there. So you've got actually a lot of good options here at catcher. You've got Stephen Vogt, who might fly under the radar here, who's still mashing the ball. He's in play for me. You've got Russell Martin, who's just absolutely on fire. Despite the fact that Toronto's scoring some runs, he has 4 solo home runs in the last 5 games. You wish that some of these came with some guys on base, but, I mean, he's a guy that's really crushing the ball right now.
Yeah, definitely. There's a decent amount of catching options today, actually. I don't mind Carlos Santana again. He's a guy I've been playing quite a bit lately. I prefer him against lefties, like we've mentioned, but Pelfrey doesn't really scare me away too much. We've seen Santana walk, I think, 6 games in a row now. I think he has 8 walks in his last 6 games, so he's seeing the ball really well. Hasn't really shown a ton of power. I don't think he has an extra base hit over that time. Oh, he does have one. He had a home run yesterday. That's right. I forgot about that. So maybe the power's coming around. He's seen the ball really well. I like him quite a bit. I don't really love playing him at first base just because first base is always so stacked. So if I'm playing him at catcher. Same goes for Buster Posey. I think he's a decent play against Cozart today, but I prefer Grandal and Santana for a little bit more power upside, it feels like right now. Posey's been struggling a little bit.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And if you're looking on FanDuel exclusively, Victor Martinez seems like he's finally starting to get it going. We know what a great hitter he's been. You know, he's coming off off-season surgery. He wasn't 100%, but 5 hits in his last 2 games, including a home run and a double. I mean, this is a guy who I believe he only had 1 extra base hit before 2 games ago on the season. Very unlike him, and he's only $3,300 tonight. So if you need a pivot from Grandal, maybe that game doesn't go. Only $100 more expensive, and certainly he's in play. And then Brian McCann against Miguel Gonzalez, who has had big-time home run struggles throughout his career. And we know McCann, lefties in with that short porch at Yankee Stadium, doesn't take much to get one out of the park there.
Yeah, definitely not. The only other guy I'm looking at is a really cheap guy, Kurt Suzuki. Has been hitting 5.6 in the lineup for Minnesota, and they've been looking better offensively. He's 2,800 on DraftKings. I believe he's 2,400 on FanDuel. 2,200 on FanDuel. Okay. So, yeah, that's my value guy. Assuming he's hitting in that spot. I don't want to play him if he's hitting 8-9 like he was earlier in the season. But if he's hitting 5.6 in that lineup right behind their, I mean, I guess you could call them big boppers, but I don't know.
Bigger boppers than some other boppers?
Okay, there you go. Bigger. All right.
But yeah, I mean, that lineup's scoring runs. I mean,
they're scoring runs. They just don't have the power guys that you really want in that, like, 3, 4, 5. But maybe that's good for him if he's hitting 5.6 because, I mean, Joe Mauer's not taking people yard very often. He's going to be on base when he's hitting. So that makes it probably better for the 6-hitter.
Yeah, when your power hitters are all in the infield, that makes you wonder about your lineup a little bit. But I'm not taking anything away from Dozier and Plouffe or anything. I'm just saying. But, all right, let's move on to first base where, as always, a ton of options from top to bottom. You've got guys like Adrian Gonzalez, Justin Morneau, both in Coors Field, both risks, but obviously both guys in play, especially Morneau, only $4K on FanDuel, really cheap price for him there. I really like Joey Votto and Jose Abreu too, but they're both in rain concerns as well. So,
and I want to play Abreu against Marquis so bad.
And he's only $3,600 on FanDuel, which is just insane. I mean,
I put him in my early lineup last night, and I was like, oh, I'm really excited about this. And then I woke up this morning and saw the rain issues, but yeah. Like you said, there's a lot of top guys up here. The other guy I was looking pretty closely at was Encarnacion against Lefty and Miley. I think Encarnacion's a really strong play today. He's 4,900 though, so he's a little pricey. Prince Fielder I like quite a bit again. You know, I've been playing him quite a bit. 4,200 on DraftKings, 3,500 on FanDuel, I believe. That's just a really, really strong GPP play, I think, because he's going to be one of those guys that's still low owned because his power really hasn't he hasn't had that streak yet where everyone gets excited about his power for a while and starts playing him. Because that's what happened last year too. He goes through these long streaks where he just hits singles for a long time and everybody forgets about him, and then he has a 2-week span where he hits 7 home runs. So
yeah. I mean, and Encarnacion only $3,700 on FanDuel, so I like that call a lot too. Adam Lynn's the guy that always tends to fly under the radar against righties. He's $3,300 on FanDuel. Real nice price for him. He's homered in 2 straight games. You're obviously not just assuming he's going to home run every game, but Jason Hamill, he's an okay strikeout pitcher, a little bit above league average. Doesn't walk anyone though, so when he's not striking guys out, they're making contact. Adam Lind in Miller Park could definitely make him pay there, and I like him a lot as the guy who has the power of the bigger bats, but isn't quite as pricey.
Yeah.
So I mean, he makes for a nice swerve off of those top guys, and then of course you're going to consider Chris Carter. He's always got home run upside. You prefer him to be a lefty against Jared Weaver, who just is god awful against lefties. But yeah, outside that, I mean, David Ortiz is only $3,000 against a bad righty and Aaron Sanchez, who's walking a ton of batters this year. But then again, David Ortiz hasn't looked like himself though, so I'm not going out of my way to roster him tonight.
Yeah, I mean, not too much cheap-wise at first base either. I think I'm spending at first base today. I do that most days, but there's even less that I like. Ike Davis's price is up on both sites a little bit. And, I mean, I don't love targeting T1 Walker. He is good stuff, so he's not a guy I like to go after. Not cheap enough for me to do that. No one really that cheap hitting in a good spot today, most likely. So, I mean, we'll see when lineups come out, but most likely I'm spending up at first base today.
Yeah, that's usually the way to go. You're going to, especially on a 15-game slate, you got 30 first basemen, probably about 12 of which have huge power. You don't get one of those guys, you'll be behind pretty quickly.
Yep.
So, all right, moving on here to second base. Here's your mention of Howie Kendrick in Coors Field. In play, but watch the weather. Love D. Gordon again, 3,800 on FanDuel, 45 on DraftKings. Tim Lincecum's not going to be stopping this guy from stealing bases.
Right.
He's hitting everyone in the entire world right now. It's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, it's hard not to look at D. Gordon tonight.
Yeah, I mean, I love him on FanDuel at his price, under 4,000. I mean, it's almost not even a question there. On DraftKings, where he's up at 4,500, I don't mind Altuve against Weaver around that same price. Obviously, prefer him against lefties, but he's just been raking. I don't mind Kipnis on FanDuel, where he's still cheap. He's ridiculous 5,200 on DraftKings against Pelfrey, so I'm going to try and avoid that. Devin Travis against the lefty and Miley is another guy I really like. He's really cheap on both sites. I think he's one of the strongest second base plays. He might be a little bit heavier owned than you're really looking for in a GPP today just because of what his price is at, but I think he's a really strong play overall.
Yeah, and you've got to love that DraftKings price at 3,300 for him.
Yep.
He's 34 on FanDuel, but rarely do you see a guy with his type of upside that cheap on DraftKings, so I'll certainly be taking advantage of that as well. Other guys, this guy has second and third base eligibility. Luis Valbuena.
Yep.
Monster power. We know Jared Weaver terrible against lefties. Valbuena's at $3K on FanDuel, $3,600 on DraftKings. Massive upside for that price. I love him. And then, of course, assuming that he's in the lineup, I of course, love Danny Valencia. He's a third base only at FanDuel, but he's second and third base on DraftKings. He's min salary on FanDuel, and he's got a great price on DraftKings as well, just $3K. Sprained his ankle walking up the stairs out of the dugout the other day. So as long as they just maybe carry him to home plate so he can hit tonight, I love that price tag for Danny.
Yeah, I know. That was what I was waiting for you to stop talking so I could bring up, and then you brought him up. But yeah, you got to worry about that ankle a little bit. The other guy I kind of like is Jose Ramirez. Hit second, I believe, yesterday for Cleveland. 3,300 against Pelfrey. I think he's a pretty strong play against Minnesota. Is a value guy. Alberto Callaspo, I believe he's going to play against the lefty today. 2,600 on DraftKings, almost minimum on FanDuel too. He's been hitting like fifth in the order, and I think he's a pretty strong play at that price too. I mean, that's a really good value there.
Yeah, and he even hit second a couple times too. So take a look there. Maybe he gets, either second or fifth. You got to like his chances.
Yeah, hard to argue with either one of those.
Yeah, absolutely. So another guy who was batting second yesterday, Corey Spangenberg, has got a really cheap price tag in the desert there. $2,900 on DraftKings, second or third base. He's certainly in play. Outside of that, not a whole lot that I like here at second base. I think that's pretty much going to wrap it up here. Unless there's someone else you got.
No, I'm all set with those guys, I think.
All right, moving on to third base, where here's your daily reminder to play Josh Donaldson against the lefty. And these sites didn't make it too hard today. $3,600 on FanDuel. I believe he's $4,400 on DraftKings. I mean, you're used to him being the most expensive option here against the lefty, and he gets a bad one today in Wade Miley. So Josh Donaldson almost assuredly will be one of the most highly owned players across the board today.
Yeah, he's been hitting a little bit too. That's kind of surprising that he came down. I mean, he hasn't been putting him in the seats, really. I think his last home run was 6 or 7 days ago, but I'm surprised he's that low. I like Arenado quite a bit. He's the guy I'm probably going to play in that Colorado game if I'm only playing like one guy.
Yeah.
Against a soft-throwing lefty like Anderson, only 4,600 on DraftKings, got a decent price on FanDuel too. He's the guy that if I'm trying to get like a minimal amount of exposure to that game, he's probably the guy I'm going to go after.
Yeah, I like that call a lot. He seems like one of those guys that everyone wants too low in the outfielders, and not everyone puts Arenado in their stacks there. So I like that. And you got to look at Alex Rodriguez. Almost had 2 homers last night. Did get one. I didn't know Delman Young could jump. Apparently he can jump. But at $3,200 on FanDuel, $39 on DK. I mean, he makes for a nice upside play in tournaments as well.
Yeah, definitely. We didn't mention him at first base because I don't think he's really playable at first base, but Chris Davis is a fine play on DraftKings at third base for GPPs. He's not going to be very heavily owned at 5,100, especially with Donaldson. Fairly weak righty and Warren that he's facing. I think he's a solid GPP play just for the power. Manny Machado you can put in probably that same category. I just prefer Davis because he hits left-handed and Warren struggles with lefties a little bit. Outside of that, not a ton else I like. Ryan Zimmerman has a decent price on both sides facing a lefty. I think he's okay, but he's not really a GPP guy for me. I prefer to play him in cash games. I think he's all right, though. As far as cheap guys go, do you have anyone you're really liking at third base cheap-wise?
I like Kyle Seager. He's cheap on FanDuel at only 3K, of course, against the righty. He's finally started to get it going. Hits in his last 4, homered last night. So you like that. Lonnie Chisenhall is interesting on FanDuel at 2,600. I don't like his DraftKings price. And you don't love his lineup spot, but he's been slowly creeping up. I think he hit 6th yesterday. He's got hits in his last 6 games. Hit a triple last night, double the day before, homer the day before that. So he's finally starting to hit for some power. And he's really cheap tonight against Pelfrey. So I think if you want a low-owned guy, hopefully he's batting 6th. I mean, I don't mind him at all as a punt.
Yeah, I mean, Chris Bryant's in the low 3s there on FanDuel. I don't mind him. He just hasn't shown enough power really for me yet. I'd rather pay up a little bit. Cody Ash is only 2,900, but he's facing Harvey. He hits righties pretty well, but I don't love that Harvey matchup. Obviously, that's probably why his price is so cheap on DraftKings. He's pretty cheap on FanDuel too, though. So depending on where he's hitting in the lineup, Utley's kind of been out for a while.
Yeah, absolutely. So he's certainly in play. Also, moving on here to shortstop, where we've got plenty of options here, of course. Troy Tulowitzki against a weak lefty you already mentioned, and Brett Anderson. If they're playing, of course, you want some Troy Tulowitzki exposure. We were waiting for a bad lefty there, and we finally get one, and now it might not happen. But either way, he's certainly in play. Ian Desmond's got big-time upside, of course, with the strikeouts. Well, he's got strikeout upside too, I guess. But Eric Stoltz, not very good against lefties, not very good against righties, not very good at anything. Maybe he's good at something, but not baseball. Ian Desmond definitely has a big-time upside in tournaments here.
Marwin Gonzalez, I know you love him. Liking him tonight again?
Oh, yeah. I love Marwin. He's minimum salary now. He keeps going cheaper on FanDuel. And, you got him at 2K now, and he should be batting second with Springer still out. I'm loving getting Marwin in there min salary.
Yeah, no one else I'm really loving, though. Shortstop's pretty weak tonight. I don't mind Hanley if he's in the lineup at shortstop on DraftKings. Got to love that eligibility. No one else that I'm feeling really, really excited about. Escobar against a lefty for Washington is okay at 3,400 on DraftKings. I think he's, 2,900 on FanDuel.
Yeah.
Pretty solid play there, too.
Yeah, I think it's going to be, for me, if I'm paying up, I'm going Tulo. And if it's cheap, I'm probably going Marwin Gonzalez. So
Same here.
Yeah, and 2,700 on DraftKings is a great price, too. So.
Wait, I forgot to mention Jimmy Rollins.
Yeah, we cannot forget Jimmy Rollins.
Have to do that daily. He's priced up because he's at Colorado, but he's actually looked pretty good over the last 2 games, finally.
Yeah.
He's a decent play. I don't think I want to pay over 4K for him on DraftKings, though.
No, I don't either. I did forget one guy now, too. Eduardo Escobar. Been hitting the ball really well. He's got 7 hits over his last 4 games. Hit a homer. He's getting on base, and that Twins lineup is sneakily scoring some runs. And I believe he batted either 5th or 6th last night, too. So you got to love that. $3,100 on DraftKings is a really good price for him. And his FanDuel price is $2,700, so he makes for a nice play as well.
Nice.
All right, moving on here to the outfield, where obviously there's always a ton of options. I'll start at the bottom and tell you that Kevin Kiermaier's minimum salary once again on FanDuel. There's another daily reminder, and he homered last night, so I'm not a complete fool for loving Kevin Kiermaier. He's got some upside. I'm certainly playing him in cash games tonight on FanDuel. He's $3,700 on DraftKings, a fine price there as well. If you're looking at top options, there are a ton as usual. I love Michael Brantley. Always goes under the radar. $4,200 on FanDuel, $55 on DraftKings is really expensive. But you tend to think that these guys in the outfield, the popular guys, are going to be your expensive. Mike Trout, of course, Jock Peterson if they play. He's going to be about 1,000,000% owned. Nelson Cruz should be pretty popular again, even though he's against. Well, maybe not quite as popular tonight because he's going against a good pitcher, but you'll certainly see some Nelson Cruz in tournaments.
Yeah, definitely. You mentioned Brantley. I think he's a great play. DraftKings priced everyone up against Pelfrey today for the Indians, so it makes it a little tough to stack. That might be one of those where you need to use one of those really cheap pitchers if you want to go after some Indians guys. Same thing with this Dodgers-Colorado game. If it's not getting rained out, you mentioned Jock Peterson. If Scott Van Slyke's in the lineup, I don't mind him against Butler and Coors. Obviously, the guys in the San Diego outfield, Kemp, Upton, Myers, all solid GPP plays. One guy I like quite a bit is Giancarlo Stanton against Lincecum. I don't like what their outfield or what their lineup's doing around him, but for 4,700 in the outfield, when we're looking at a ton of guys well over 5,000 today, I think he's a pretty decent value. I don't know if he'll be heavy owned just because there's nothing really special about this matchup. I think he's a pretty strong GPP play. Jose Bautista is a guy I like, but he's another high-priced one, 4,900. Facing a lefty in Miley, though, you got to feel pretty good about that. As far as cheap guys go, Anthony Goes, if he's starting and hitting first again against a righty Ventura, only 3,100 on DraftKings, pretty cheap. Near minimum on FanDuel, too. There's one other really cheap guy I was looking at. Michael Taylor for Washington is 3,400 on DraftKings, near minimum on FanDuel, too. Facing a lefty, he's hit lefties pretty decently. If he's high in the order, I like him as a value play today, too.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that. I'm going to throw a couple guys out here. I like Justin Upton against Hellickson, who's struggled against righties throughout his career. Obviously, Upton's got better numbers against lefties, but in Arizona, he gets a nice park shift from San Diego. He's sitting at $4,300 on FanDuel and $5,000 on DraftKings. Kind of pricey there. I love Jacoby Ellsbury just about every night. Obviously, hasn't really shown much power, but gets a great matchup today against a guy who gives up a ton of home runs, so maybe he gets a hold of one here. Even if he doesn't, he's got a nice safe floor, gets on base, he steals a lot. So I definitely like him. If you're looking at other guys, why did I lose his name? Billy Burns.
That's who I was just going to mention. Yeah,
I almost said Billy Blanks. I don't know why I was about to say Billy Blanks, but Billy Burns is still really cheap on both sites, near minimum salary. He's a great guy. And I got to throw out one more guy here that Josh had mentioned, Chris Colabello. He's only played 2 games, but he's gone 6 for 8. Obviously, you're not expecting that every game, but we know Toronto's in a good spot today. He's minimum salary on FanDuel and $2,800 on DraftKings. You can play him at first base or outfield. You're obviously going to play him in the outfield, but I mean, he's a nice high upside guy for cheap.
Yeah, I like both those guys. Burns has been one of my favorite plays lately. I think he's positive on FanDuel in like 5 of the last 6 games or something like that.
Yep.
Only has 2 stolen bases. I think he has more speed upside than that even. I really like him tonight as a value play. He's going to be in a ton of my lineups.
Yeah, an guy who's interesting here, who only one hit each of his last 4 games, but his last 7 games. Wow, 6 of his last 7 games, he has either a double or a home run. Shin-Soo Choo. On his season, he's not hitting well. Texas starting to get it going. He's back in that leadoff spot. He's $4,100 on DraftKings. On FanDuel, he's only $2,900. So I think he makes a really interesting tournament play, especially if he's leading off again. I mean, like I said, the guy's hitting extra base hits just about every day. He's not a guy that strikes out a ton. His average on the season is terrible, but against Nate Carnes, I think maybe he could be a surprise guy tonight. Maybe he takes him deep.
Yeah, last guy I have is a pretty cheap guy in that Colorado Dodgers game. If they're playing that, Drew Stubbs is really low priced for being in Colorado. Hasn't been playing a ton, but in that doubleheader, I think he hit a home run in the first game as a pinch hitter, and then had a nice game in the second game. If he's in the lineup, I think he's a pretty strong play. He's hit lefties pretty well in his career. The Rockies have a bunch of left-handed hitting outfielders, so maybe they give one of them the day off against Anderson. Just keep an eye on if he's in the lineup, because I think that price is just way too cheap if he's hitting high in the order in that park.
Absolutely. I like that call. And one more guy for me here is Matt Joyce. He's $2,200 on FanDuel. Roberto Hernandez is getting mashed this year. He's got a 34% hard hit rate, giving up a ton of hard hits.
He's leading the league in home run to fly ball ratio over the last 2 years, too.
Yeah, and I don't think it's necessarily fluky. I mean, he's just the bad pitcher. There's a reason why he's the cheapest guy most places.
Yeah.
Joyce is cheap on DraftKings, too, at just $3,500. So.
Yeah, he is. That's a really good play. I like that one, too.
All right. With that, that's going to pretty much wrap things up. I guess you could consider, by the way, Coco Crisp if he's leading off again. It'll be just his 3rd game. Doesn't have a hit yet. Didn't start yesterday, but we know when he gets on, he's got speed. I mean, that lineup's been quietly scoring some runs. So if you want a cheap guy under the radar, I don't mind him either.
Yep.
All right, that's going to wrap things up. Find us on Twitter at DFCafe. All of our great content for tonight's slate at dailyfantasycafe.com. We'll see you guys tomorrow.